So, our late night journey led us to not only defusing the moon, but also taking a subatomic journey into our own drink. This time, let's see what our early afternoon path takes us towards. And man, I thought we already had enough dangers trying to get into an Uber or Lyft currently. Yeah, somehow or another, things managed to get even more strange as we head into the early afternoon. Don't manage to find ourselves atop a very high chimney, but instead, possibly in a small pocket dimension. Needless to say, where we are is not so much our primary concern. No, our greater concern is that somehow or another there are still bombs we're going to have to deal with. Now, as this is kind of the split between what we did last time and, we're still kind of early on in the game, so this railroad crossing pole here is not going to be really that difficult of a puzzle to deal with. More or less, what it is going to introduce us to is the fact that we're not always going to be entirely limited to solely the magnifying glass and the screwdriver. Instead, we do have two brand new tools to deal with this time around, and one of those we can use to unhook the far end of the pole here, and that is the socket wrench. Now, as with pretty much the screwdriver, it does have a clockwise and counterclockwise mechanism, and in essence it does pretty much operate the exact same way as a screwdriver. It's just you do have to kind of be mindful of what you're trying to interact with on the bomb itself. Likewise, I would kind of say, pretty much like the moon bomb that we had to defuse previously, this bomb also will kind of introduce us to something to kind of be mindful to, and that is more or less dead ends. Spoiler alert, this is not going to be the way that leads us to how to defuse the bomb. Instead, I get the feeling that more than likely this is trying to lead us towards maybe a hint to defuse the bomb at the end. I did not go through the effort of Google translating to try to get an idea of what these messages say, but I'm sure they're either helpful or attempting to be humorous. Either way, just something to keep in mind that there are dead ends, and where we actually need to draw our attention to is the underside of the base here. From here, we are going to be able to use our other new tool. And that is going to be the wrench to unhook these bolts. And we also get our first tight timer for this video. This one is pretty lenient. And immediately after that, we do have one other bolt to unhook. I also realize now that there was a message I missed, but it should be fine. With that out of the way, if you did not manage to use the socket wrench on the end of the railroad pole, I'm having a brain fart as to what some places would call these things. I would say I'm not in a location that has a heavy amount of train traffic to where I have to deal with these fairly often, but I know especially in Japan, they have bullet trains and things like that running through a number of their residential, suburban areas, things like that, so having to deal with these is probably a more common occurrence than they have probably a better idea of what these might be called. And still, at this point, we've honestly dismantled this thing probably about 90% of the way through. And our one last hurdle is something that really hasn't been introduced yet, and that is the idea of patience. Yeah, the hammer in the center will react to like how much we are unscrewing and messing with the screws on the panel here. So you don't want to just go unscrewing crazy, because otherwise it will hit the mechanism on the left-hand side and cause the bomb to trigger. Will be something that will come up quite often as we progress through the game. But now that we are at the normal blue and red cables, well, I am going to go with the blue, just because, I don't know, trains. So yeah, I'd say slightly easier than the moon puzzle. Kind of on par, but that's to be understood, because this is still meant to be at that point of the game. And was it all a dream that we fell out of that taxi and into the underground dimension? And pretty much like with whenever we finish the moon puzzle from the last video, we do get a split here. And we do get one at the same times, but we also get another brand new time. So there is some overlap there, but yeah, since we already did the puzzle at 10:29, we are going to go ahead and check to see what is waiting for Suzuki at 11:42 a.m. Yep, it is the great Japanese pastime of baseball. And while I'm not super familiar with baseball, I do have a rudimentary understanding. I'm fairly certain, though, that you cannot switch out hitters mid-batting. But, Suzuki is just that special of a person that, yeah, we can bring her in, she'll turn the game right around. I mean, she is super proficient at bomb disposal. I'm sure she's great at baseball.
Strike, batter out. 試合終了。
So, I realize the game has been kind of abstract or surreal to some degree. I don't honestly know what the hell happened there. Somehow in Suzuki's anger, she broke through our dimension into the baseball dimension, and now has gone to this very early 2000s pinball machine. And even then, I use pinball very loosely here. I know that over in Japan they have they call them like 10 yen games, where you basically move yen pieces down a board to try to hit specific openings in the board. I don't think this is that. I don't think this is pachinko either. More or less, we have better things to deal with at the moment, such as dismantling this to get to the rich, creamy bomb center to make sure that we don't die in this yet again very strange pocket dimension. And the good thing is that we are given some similar tools here, such as our socket set to unscrew the legs off the table here.
つも
And that does allow us egress further inside of the pinball table.
脳天
And so far, nothing has been exceptionally difficult with this table. Though it will shortly be throwing us its first major hurdle, which is in the form of this especially toy timer. Now, it may not seem like that much, but keep in mind we do have to unscrew 4 different screws. And if you do somehow get managed stuck reading that little note card, yeah, that alone can waste you about 2 to 3 seconds. Our next major hurdle is the interior of the pinball table itself, because once we get a little closer, that ball is going to start moving, and we need to make sure and unscrew all these screws before it makes its way all the way down the table. The problem is, much like with that railroad crossing sign, well, if we go too fast with these screws, the hammers themselves will rock back and forth and also hit the triggering mechanism. So you kind of have to start switching in between screws to not get stuck waiting too long for the hammers to stop swinging, because yeah, that ball is moving a lot quicker than you might think.
取れた
And once it comes down to our selection of which wire to cut, we simply have to do like we did on a previous puzzle and cut the one that does not have electricity going through it. So yeah, I would say this path is a little bit harder because of that puzzle. But it does show us a few more opportunities about just how talented Suzuki is.
セーブしない
Also, it's a bit hard to tell, but we are actually at the halfway point of the game, but since there are multiple pathways to take, yeah, there's probably going to be 3 to 4 more videos to come, but for right now we are at pretty much another major split in the story. And just because we had such odd luck previously going with the later point in the day, I'd figure, sure, we're close to midnight, let's see what was going on with Suzuki then. Because honestly, at this point, we still have no real backstory on Suzuki. We have no idea why she is having to deal with all these bombs on her day.
助けて
And really, the mysteries keep on piling up more and more. As after a quick fist fights in the back streets of, let's say, Akihabara, the place with all the electronics. Yeah, somehow Suzuki lands herself in a prison cell, and even that does not manage to keep her safe from whoever is laying all these bombs around for her to dispose. This is where there is a pretty noticeably large difficulty spike. You could already kind of tell there's a 9-minute timer, which is very long. And yeah, we get an immediately tight timer right at the start there, which could easily lead you to fail. And as you can probably recall from some of the other puzzles that we have done, the side paths are normally only for hints, I would say. In this case, though, it feels more like they want to distract you and kind of waste your time. Because, yeah, there are a whole lot of different little cards here, and some of them are, well, exceptionally long to read through, but that does not stop the timer, so yeah, we kind of have to leave these behind and get forward, or get moving with actually disposing of the bomb in the ceiling. Because while this light source doesn't seem that large, it's actually pretty complex once we start to break it down. And I would say for the most part, you don't really have a whole lot of time to really dilly-dally. Like that little side trip we took down that one vent, that probably wasted a bit too much time. Alright, so we have a glass case, we have two wires pretty much holding up a magnet of sorts for that little metal ball. And to get through that metal case, we just had to drop the ball. Now we have what appears to be a whole maze of red and blue wires. It can be a bit overwhelming, especially if you don't notice the fact that you do have a new tool in your magical inventory, and that is duct tape. And we won't simply be cutting wires through our journey. Sometimes it is very necessary to replenish the electrical source running to some motors. And the other bit is a little bit more straightforward. We just had to reconnect the red wire connection here with the screw. And things have been fairly safe at this point. There's not really been any, ways to fail so far. Huh? But it's when we get to this level that this bomb does introduce us to our first possibility of accidentally setting off the bomb ahead of time. Because we do want to make sure and do a full scan of the outside of the cylinder here, because, yeah, see that circuit board down there, which means that if that ball does drop, it will end up setting the bomb off ahead of time. And there are a few different ways that can possibly happen, such as if we basically break the connection between the power connections for the red and blue wires here, so we can kind of safely circumvent that by turning the screw. But if you did happen to unscrew the panel, or even cut the red and blue wires ahead of time, that would cause the ball to drop, and you would end up failing. But now that the red and blue still have their safe connections, we can now easily cut these red and blue connectors to the panel here. Bit unnecessary, but I mostly just wanted to make sure for myself. And then we can unscrew this metal panel, which will allow us the ability to go further inside the bomb itself. Now, I would say this next bit is a bit more overwhelming than it actually is. Like, we can already tell from the very start that there is the circuit board on the right-hand side there, and that we inevitably just want to get the metal ball to fall to the left-hand side. It's just that as you scan around, there, you know, the red and blue wires just kind of encircle everything here. And I guess the idea is maybe to confuse you about, you know, if I cut the blue wire, will that pull the ball towards left or right? But yeah, it's honestly pretty easy to follow the wires and make sure that the ball falls on the left-hand side. Also, since you do have the duct tape, you can always repair the wire and, you know, have the ball go back to the center if need be. But we are getting very close to the end of the bomb here. And yet again, probably a lot more complicated than it initially seems. Really, though, we just want to get to those 4 screws, and one of them is kind of covered up by a bar that we need to move. And to do that, we just have to reconnect the power via the red. But yeah, we want to make sure that it doesn't go too far over, in so much as that it will, you know, trigger the circuit board there. But yeah, I think it just wants to overwhelm you by just having wires crisscross everywhere and make you question if you're making the right decision. Still, the bomb does have one other curveball that it does want to throw at you.
ちゃんと見て。
And that's the fact that you've disconnected all the lighting in this light, so make the best guess you can about which wire you need to cut. Yeah, definitely one of the harder bombs that we've had to deal with so far, one of the more complex ones, at least visually, but definitely will not be the last.
すごい。
ジーンズ、お前一人で大丈夫か？
すいませんデカ長、お願いできますか？
大体のことは分かった。
ね？どう考えても正当防衛でしょ？
ああ、ぶっ放してよ。
お前もそれ食ってさっさと帰れ。
バキュンバキュン。